I'm Mike Costello, and I'm here with Dr. Iris Freelander today, and we'd like to talk to you in the next few minutes about it, having an attitude of gratitude. And in this program, we talk to you so often about the importance of our attitudes, the things that go on in our minds, and how our mind process, or the processes of our minds and the way that our minds operate, determines so much the quality of our lives. And so today we want to talk about having an attitude of gratitude and the importance of gratitude in enhancing the quality of our life. I guess the beginning of this discussion could be about the fact that our attitudes do shape our life, don't they, Iris?
Yes, indeed. And the happiest people are those who are the people who express gratitude and the people who really appreciate others. And those who are grouchy are usually not very appreciative of other people.
And the importance of our expressing gratitude to people is something that we forget sometimes. I guess at Thanksgiving and different times of the year when we really think about giving thanks or expressing gratitude, we think about it. But it's really an attitude that can benefit us anytime, isn't it?
Yes, and it's something that some people just don't do. I had a recent house guest for a couple of weeks, and we were driving in LA. I was driving, and she was with me, and we stopped to ask directions. And so a young man gave us wonderfully explicit directions. Then we started to drive away, and he was on her side of the car. And I said, "Say thank you." And she said, so she expressed thank you to him. And he said, "You are welcome." And she said, "Thank you for reminding me to say that." She says, "I never think to say thank you." And so then she discussed, and I didn't lecture her, she discussed that she's going to always say thank you. And she said, he said, "You're welcome," so cheerfully. And I told her what happens when you say thank you, a light goes out to the other person. And when they express thank you, you're welcome, then the light comes back. And it's truly a light that can be seen.
And that positive connection, what we're really talking about is creating a vibration or a presence that is positive and affirmative.
Yes, yes. And if we remember to do that, it reflects into our own aura, it reflects into the very cells of our bodies, and it keeps us healthier and happier and stronger.
One of the concepts that is so much a part of metaphysical philosophy and New Thought teaching is the concept and idea of giving thanks or expressing gratitude in advance.
Yes.
And then another concept is giving thanks or expressing gratitude for all circumstances and situations, even the negative experiences of our life. And I think sometimes that is difficult for people who are new to the teaching to understand the dynamic of what that does for us. But giving thanks or expressing gratitude in advance before we receive really sets the stage for receiving a lot of either good feelings, or it even works from the standpoint of creating our prosperity and abundance, doesn't it?
Yes, it does. And very often it works to create a parking place for ourselves. We can say thank you, Father, in advance, and then when we get there, we have a parking place. Now, it doesn't always work, but mostly it does.
And that giving thanks in advance really creates for us the image of those things that are to come.
Yes, and it sets the energy, and as you always express so beautifully, everything is energy and vibration. So it sets up the energy in advance. And isn't it exciting to know that that energy is in our bodies and we benefit from it?
Right, that energy connection is something that we could talk a little bit about, and that is that our thoughts really are creative forces,
Yeah.
and that as we think, we create the environment in which we live.
Yes, that's right, we do. And I was thinking too a second ago that when we bless our food, it really changes the consistency of the food. It changes the content. It's just like when communion is blessed by the minister, then it changes it. And tests have been made proving that that is true. And isn't that exciting?
And we know too that these aspects of giving thanks also create a centering of the person's presence, which brings a calm into the physical body, which has physical improvements or helps for us.
Yes, that implication is so very important. And if we would remember that, then we would be more apt to express gratitude, because then we're benefiting directly every time, and we can feel it in ourselves. And you know, it's lovely to see other people bloom and blossom when you express gratitude to them. It lightens their countenance, and isn't that Isn't that true that their countenance does change when someone has expressed gratitude to them?
And it opens us to more fully communicate with them.
Yes, and creates the bond between us. As you said a moment ago, the energy then enters that person, and so it makes a difference in their life. And if we can all express gratitude um, more often, however often we already do it, then, but sincerely, totally sincerely, then it would change the world.
hmm Now, we always or so often talk about the triune part of our being, which is mind, body, spirit. And so, this aspect of expressing gratitude and having an attitude of gratitude does affect the mind and the body and the spirit, doesn't it? I
Yes.
guess in the beginning, we could talk about what it does for us mentally. It opens us mentally to.
Yes, it would. And not only would it open us mentally, but it is stimulating. And as it's stimulating, then we're more fully alive. So again, we're just doing ourselves a favor, but we're also doing a favor to the other person. And we mention here quite often, you and I, about the global brain, the mass consciousness. So it impacts on that mass consciousness or global brain, making a big difference.
Let's talk a little bit about that. As people are expressing gratitude among themselves, and as we're expressing gratitude as groups one to another, how does that impact the global, how does the global consciousness operate?
Well, everything is impressed upon the global brain. And if everyone, let's say we have 1,000 people in one given spot, and if those 1,000 people, that's a lot of energy, potential energy. If they're all depressed over some incident, and then the energy would not go out in a positive way, but the energy would go out negative. It would go out as darkness, but it would still go out, and it would be dark. And then if all those 1,000 people were joyous and light-filled, then that energy would go out as light, and it would express in a positive way. And I'm sure that's how you see it too.
Yes, that collective consciousness
Yes.
is a very important aspect of life, and we all need to understand that as we think, as our thought processes move forward in our own being, it affects the people around us, and it affects those even beyond those around us. And I think it's very important for us to understand that we are creating a collective consciousness. We're having an impact upon the environment in which we find ourselves. And a good example of that is simply a feeling that most people have had from time to time when they walk into a place or walk into a group of people and
Yes.
either feel welcomed or unwelcome, feel
Yes.
positive or feel negative. And so the reality of this vibration or of this energy is very real, and it is felt and sensed by those around us, and it goes out and creates a larger environment or a global consciousness, as we or a collective consciousness, as some people refer to it.
Yes, and that is so important in all. Well, we're all one, and because we're all one, whatever we do, think, or feel impacts upon the global brain and impacts, and therefore upon others, because it's like cosmic soup. We're all in the energy field together. So we can, if our energy is strong enough, then it can impact on others more strongly. If it's not as strong as it might be, then that would impact more on us, and we'd be more susceptible to the mood of the global consciousness.
And so often people are not conscious or they're not aware of the impact that their thought processes have on the environment and those around them. And so for many of us, we go through this life experience just having one thought after another, moving from point to point without a lot of conscious thought about it, but we're actually sending a lot of things out into our immediate environment. And what we're sending in many cases is a lot of confusion and turmoil, because many
Exactly.
people are in a state of mental and emotional turmoil a great deal of the time.
Yes, and I can remember a spiritual teacher saying to me once that we need to be one-pointed in our thinking, which is essentially what you're saying right now. And at the time I heard that, I remembered asking my aunt a question when I was about, 10 years old. And I said, what were you thinking? And she said, oh, I was thinking of many things. And it impressed me at that moment that if she's thinking of many things, she's probably not thinking of any of them very well. And that was true, Because whenever we're thinking of many things simultaneously, then we have scattered thoughts, and we're not thinking of any one thing, and we're not going to do constructive work if we're thinking of many other things. It's just like some people read books and who several simultaneously, and I can't imagine why anyone would want to read 6 or 8 books simultaneously, because I don't think anyone's mind could keep up with that. Most of us do well to keep up with one thread of thought throughout a book.
And of course, the importance of sequential thought processes is very, very important in
Yes.
order to maintain that continuity and to be aware of how our minds operate and to be participants in the way that we're thinking and the thoughts that are going on in our minds.
Yes. And when we do that, we are more at peace. We're more at one with divinity, and and we're able to do uh, more concise, clear work.
Mhm. So the mental aspect, the mind and the body, in our tradition, Myrtle Fillmore is one of the great foundresses of metaphysical philosophy and New Thought teaching. And Myrtle talked about giving thanks to the body, to our physical body, for the things that the body does for us. And she had a technique, which we've talked about in the past in our discussions about healing, both physical and spiritual, emotional and mental healing. But Myrtle Fillmore believed in giving healing treatments to the physical body by giving thanks in prayer or meditation in silence to the parts of the body that are causing us infirmity. And out of that, out of the blessing of those parts of the body that are bringing us discomfort, comes the healing regenerative power into those parts of our body, which is directed by both the spirit and by the mind. And I think that's very, very important because so often when we have physical infirmities, and we know that healing occurs on many levels,
Yes.
and the physical healing that takes place in our body is sometimes short-circuited or stopped by the fact that we mentally send condemnation to that part of our body because we believe that it's a problem. For instance, if people have some horrible back pains, the obvious thing is to think of the back as a bad thing, as failing to meet the expectations that we have, as limiting us, and to begin a mindset or a mind process of sending negative energy and thought to the back or to the spine, which when in fact what ought to be happening or what Myrtle Fillmore taught was to bless that part of the body.
Mhm. Yes, and I had a very good example, concrete example of that yesterday. A friend called and asked me to pray for his. He said, "I wanted to come over for you to give me a spiritual healing, but he couldn't come, and I couldn't have accepted him being there at that time." But I said, "Let's do this by phone." It's been very successfully done by phone many times from many healers. So at first I had him totally relax, and then I had him send the blessing to it was the pyloric valve in his body that was not working that connects the esophagus to the stomach. And so it, there was 3 things we did. 1, for him to relax. 2, to thank God that he was being relaxed and healed, and that he is healed, and that valve is working to perfection. And to tell his body how grateful he is that it functions perfectly. And so he called back later. So after a relatively short time, he said, "I think I'm going to take a nap now. I feel really sleepy." So and that was wonderful that he could feel so sleepy and that he had the privilege of sleeping at that time in the middle of the morning. So then he called back in the afternoon and he said, "I had a really long nap, the first time I've slept comfortably," and thanked me. And that was the magic part.
Right, which began this process of
Yes.
his being able to have the healing that he needed to have. We'd like to pause at this point in the program and share with you the opportunity of receiving some literature so that you can better understand the teachings we're sharing with you.
We would like to give you the opportunity to explore and discover in your own home the new thought teachings that this program is sharing with you by sending you a free copy of one of these booklets. Simply address your request to Confident Living at P.O. Box 7726, Long Beach, California 90807. Whatever your dream, whatever your vision, you can reach it through confident living.
Before the break, we were talking about the ability that we have to speak words of gratitude to our physical bodies and bring about healings in that way. And Iris, you just shared the real example of having firsthand experience with someone who did learn to express gratitude to the point of, or to the part of the body that was causing the discomfort. And that brought about a very positive result.
Yes, it did. It brought out a positive result in his body, and he affirmed that later in the afternoon. And it also gave me a very good feeling that he was thoughtful enough to call and say thank you.
Mhm.
And he would have probably said thank you even if it hadn't worked. But it was very thrilling to know that the energy was there and worked for him.
Right. And so often in counseling and counseling with people who have illnesses, we talk and teach the technique of being positive and affirmative to those points of limit or pain.
Mhm.
And that is part and parcel, really, of the metaphysical teaching, which is really to bring about a blessing in the midst of every circumstance and situation. I've had many examples, as I'm sure you have, where people have very common problems, like a headache, for example. And the tendency is, of course, to dislike that head and the pain that's coming from it, when in fact our brains and our minds and our heads do so many wonderful and marvelous things. And when we begin to enter into both treatment and meditation in that region of the body and begin to create a vibration of blessing and gratitude for all that that body function does, then the function of the body begins to reconstruct and the body begins its process of regeneration. Now, in many cases, as we know very well, in the cases of severe diseases, cancer and other serious challenges, a whole combination of things come into the healing process. And we're not talking about at all one thing bringing about a healing, but we are talking about the ability of this technique to contribute and to complement any other kind of healing. And you and I have worked extensively with people with terminal illnesses who have used this technique with good results in combination with medicine, with surgery, without medicine, with surgery. And so the whole issue is that this is one adjunct
Yes.
to the process. And this is not the end, the beginning and the end of the process, but it does certainly begin to deal and address the problems of healing of the physical body. And that centering presence is tremendously important.
Yes, and that what you said reminds me that we all have to die, and we have a given time to go. Well, I think we have a given time. Whether or not we do, we still are going. And so not always will people be healed physically, but when they're healed in mind and spirit, then that is a wonderful thing. And it's even more wonderful that they're healed in that way than that they're healed physically.
Right.
Although it's wonderful to be healed physically.
And the giving thanks in advance, one of the healing techniques that we use, both in counseling and in spiritual healing treatment, is to give thanks in advance
Yeah.
for that which is already present but has not been made manifest to us in either the physical or the spiritual realm. And we know that no matter what the appearance is, that the reality of healing, the underlying reality of balance and wholeness and health is always there. And for that we can always give thanks. And because of that, people, especially people who are facing serious illnesses, are able so much more effectively to deal with their circumstance and are so much more open to the healing modalities, all of which are contributing to their recovery and to the improvement of whatever their condition may be.
Yes. And that goes too for people who are fighting, who have interpersonal relationships that are not pleasant. If they can just give thanks for a pleasant relationship, it makes a big difference, because what happens, it relaxes the person who's doing the praying, and then they are not sending out sparks of negative energy, and then the other person feels that warm energy, good energy, and then they're not combative anymore. It's when two people keep hitting at each other, then no good energy is involved.
Mm-hmm. And that the importance of understanding that that attitude of gratitude, that expression of gratitude or thanks, and the expectation of good in the midst of all circumstances sets in motion the ability for positive things to happen.
Yeah.
And I think you're absolutely right, especially when we're dealing with emotional issues, relationship issues, personal issues, and psychological issues, mental issues. We're dealing with a combination of negative influences
Mhm.
and negative vibrations. And anything that we can do to negate that sets in motion a totally opposite aspect, which is a positive, affirmative, centering, peaceful reality.
Yes, and we've all seen it happen. Those of us who do counseling, particularly, we're counseling someone who is so unhappy, and they say yes, but he or she did this and did that and did this. And if we can just get them to calm down enough to see that if whatever that person does is their problem, if they can just relax and be expectant of good and grateful for the good that they do have, then and expectant, as you said, of the good, then it makes a big difference in their attitude and in their relationship.
And this giving thanks for these negative aspects of life doesn't mean at all giving in to them. It is, or giving up. It does mean that we are seeing beyond what our senses are telling us is true, and we're opening ourselves to a different reality. And in order to do that, we embrace whatever it is we're facing. And so often we're facing difficult times, we're facing difficult circumstances and situations. And by embracing that and understanding that all of the circumstances and situations of life are simply lessons, aren't they? And we
Yes.
talk about that so much.
Yes, we do. And if we accept that everything is a lesson, then we can accept the bad things, so-called bad, the negative things, far more easily because we're looking for the good, we're looking for the lesson, we're looking for the positive, and we can always find it if we look.
You're right. That old question of what is the good in this situation?
Yes.
What is the good in this? And of course, our first response is, well, there's nothing good in
Uh-huh.
especially negative experiences or a limit, lack, illness, depression. But in fact, there is good in the midst of everything because it's bringing us to a point. We don't know where it's bringing us, but it is taking us somewhere that we have not yet been.
Yes. Well, we can all look back on our own life experiences and those that have been most unpleasant. We can see the good. We can, in retrospect. But if we can expect the good before the retrospect time, then we're that much ahead.
And the importance of that is to get out of the experience, isn't it? So often we find ourselves and those around us and those we talk with are so immersed, just like the people that you referred to a moment ago, are so immersed in their negative experience that they won't let go of it. And
Yeah.
we talk so often in my our talks about the lady, and I've told this story, and you know it well, but the lady who came to us for counseling after a divorce, and I had had several sessions with her, and she was so upset and so devastated, and this divorce had just destroyed her life, and she was just at her wit's end. And after several sessions, something tipped me to the fact that this was not a fresh experience. And I asked her when she was divorced or when the divorce took place, and she said 17 years ago. And so for 17 years, she had held on to this. And the importance of in the midst of a negative experience, giving thanks if you can, or at least expressing gratitude for what it is going to bring to you. Now, in a divorce, that's a very hard position or place to come to, but there will be good out of that experience. There will be good out of a serious illness. There will be good out of every experience in life. And the good is not always seen at the entrance into that experience. And so often we go through the valley of the shadow. We go through, but we do go through it. And if we don't express gratitude, if we don't open ourselves to the reality that there is something coming of this experience in my life, then we very often find ourselves in that valley for a very long time.
Yes. And we can pull ourselves out just by knowing, putting faith in God, and knowing there is a higher power and that we have access to that higher power. And also, as you said, expressing thanks in advance and looking for the reason that we need to be apart from that person.
Mhm.
When divorce happens, well, it happens. And there's good reasons for it. And so we don't want to keep someone shackled to us who doesn't want to be with us. So if we look at it in that light, then it's easier for that separation.
I worked recently with a group of therapists who were call themselves Zen Christians. A very interesting concept of marrying the Eastern Zen philosophy with Christianity, and their part of their work is with people who have serious diseases and people who have chronic pain, and a part of the process is for people to make friends with the pain. to become friends with the pain and allow, because in many cases the pain is a part, the physical pain is a part of their life experience, a part of their physical experience because of maybe a back injury or some other problem. And so by connecting with that and becoming one with it, as opposed to fighting it, embracing the reality of it, looking for the good in it, and in a way giving thanks for it because of what it has brought in a life lesson, these people who are suffering horrible chronic pain are able to cope with it in a much more positive way. And I think that is accessible and available to all of us if we choose to have the right attitude
Yes,
about
that's a wonderful example. And I'll bet they taught them, those Buddhist Christians taught people to breathe deeply, because in the East, they make a career of teaching us how to breathe properly. And most people in the West don't breathe properly. I can remember I was taught, for example, in a certain school that I attended, to pull in my stomach. And there, you only can breathe from the top of your chest if you're breathing, if your stomach's pulled in. So in the West, we have been taught these bad habits that are not conducive to good breathing. We need to breathe so deeply through our nostrils that it goes all the way down and expands our stomach. And when people do that, and I do, as you know, as you do, spiritual healing work, and that's one of the major factors of healing. If the person will just breathe deeply and they're relaxing into the pain, they're relaxing into the turmoil, they're relaxing into whatever it is, like totally relaxing into it, which is the same idea, isn't it?
It is absolutely the same idea. It is the idea of having the attitude, whether it's breathing, whether it's our mental processes, whether it's our spiritual techniques, having the attitude to express gratitude in the midst of all of life's experiences, mental, physical, spiritual, emotional, regardless of what aspect of life we're addressing. And Dr. Freelander and I have been sharing with you concepts in confident living. We hope you found this information useful, and we look forward to seeing you next time.
This program is a community outreach of Christ Church. Dr. Mike Costello speaks each Sunday morning at 11 a.m., and Dr. Iris Freelander speaks on Wednesday evenings at 7 p.m. at the church. On Sunday evenings at 6 p.m., there is a meditation and healing service. Come and join us. You will be warmly welcomed.